Chærete friends, welcome to Classics in Color, a weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Graves, and today we are going to be reading some ghost stories. Most ghosts who show up in Greek and Roman literature are just there to ask for a favor or to give a warning or some advice to a loved one, but today we are going to be focusing on some violent ghosts with a bit of a penchant for murder. My major source for this video is a lovely book entitled Haunted Greece and Rome, Ghost Stories from Classical Antiquity by Dr. Felton. So thank you so much to Dr. Felton for pointing me towards the stories that we are going to be using today. Our first story comes from Apuleius' Metamorphoses, also sometimes known as The Golden Ass. This is a novel that is chock full of comedic hijinks and misadventures, but it is also full of violence. We are looking at a passage specifically in Book 9 of this work where the main character describes the following spooky scenario. There is a baker and his wife who have been fighting for quite a while. They are not on good terms. He's been cheating on her constantly, and the wife has become so fed up that she finally resorts to an enchantress. She goes to this witch and she asks that first of all she try to cast a love spell on her husband essentially to make him fall back in love with her and stop cheating on her all the time. Despite the witch's best efforts, this isn't able to happen. She isn't able to get it done, and so they resort to their plan B, which is to summon a ghost to murder the baker. Let's read how Apuleius describes this. About noon, there came suddenly a woman into the mill house, very sorrowful, clothed in wretched rags and in gloomy garb like those that are accused of a crime. Half naked and with bare and unshodden feet, meager, exceedingly pale and thin and ill-favored, and her hair, which was growing towards white, mixed with cinders and scattering upon her face. This woman gently took the baker by the hand, and feigning that she had some secret matter to tell him, led him into his chamber, where they remained a good space with closed doors. But when all the corn was ground that was ready to hand, and the servants were compelled to call their master to give them more, they called very often at his chamber door, and asked that they might have further matter for their labor. But when no person gave answer to their often and loud crying, they knocked louder, to none effect. Then they began to mistrust, insomuch that with great pushing they brake open the door, which was very closely barred. But when they were come in, they could not find the woman, but only their master, hanging dead upon a rafter of the chamber. So I think we have all the classic trappings of a good ghost story there, including the ambiguity. No one knows if she hung him or if she controlled his mind somehow and made him hang himself. We'll never know. The one detail that might be a little unfamiliar there is that this story takes place at midday or at noon. Most of our ghost stories, things happen at midnight, right? That's kind of the witching hour. But for Greeks and Romans, noon is just as spooky as midnight is. You see this trope throughout their literature. Ghosts certainly can appear after dark, but ghosts and all kinds of other weird and scary and bad and supernatural things tend to happen around noon. They just consider it sort of bad luck, and they think that you are crazy and you're probably, going to be driven mad or have something terrible happen to you if you're up and about and working at noon. They think that, smart and respectable people stay inside, stay in the shade at that time. So for us, it's a bit weird for a ghost to show up in the middle of the day, but for them, this would totally check out. The classical world did not have the term or the concept of poltergeist, obviously, but the next two stories that we are going to look at share a lot of similarities with that modern trope. The first passage that we're going to look at comes from Suetonius, his biography of Rome's very first emperor, Augustus. Suetonius is describing the house that Augustus was allegedly born in and then grew up in, and strangely, it now has this reputation of being a bit haunted. Suetonius says that it is kept as a bit of a museum of sorts. People like to go and see where Augustus grew up, but it also has this reputation of, let's say, bumps in the night. Let's see what he has to say. His nursery is shown to this day in a villa belonging to the family in the suburbs of Bellatrix, being a very small place and much like a pantry. An opinion prevails in the neighborhood that he was also born here. Into this place no person presumes to enter unless upon necessity and with great devotion. From a belief, for a long time prevalent, that such as rashly enter it are seized with great horror and consternation, which a short while since was confirmed by a remarkable incident. For when a new inhabitant of the house had, either by chance or to try truth of the report, taken up his lodging in that apartment, in the course of the night, a few hours afterwards, he was thrown out by some sudden violence, he knew not how, and was found in a state of stupefaction, with a coverlid of his bed before the door of the chamber. So I will admit, this does not seem like a malevolent spirit. It's more like the spirit of Augustus just doesn't want people messing with his room. I honestly find it a little bit humorous. I just imagine Augustus being like, "Get out, Mom! Like, don't touch my stuff." But maybe that's just me. Our final story comes from Lucian Philoseudes, in which he describes a little bronze figurine of Hippocrates. So Hippocrates is this Greek scholar, a doctor. He's often called the father of medicine because he practiced medicine, but then he's also one of the oldest authors that we have to write a whole bunch of treatises describing like the different herbal and surgical remedies that he attempted on different people. So he's a very important person in ancient medicine and science, and apparently this little apothecary shop had a little bronze figurine of him that they kept, in honor of the father of medicine. But somehow this little figurine has become haunted or possessed, or something is wrong with this little guy. Let's check it out. As soon as the light is out, the figurine goes all around the house making noises, overturning the vials, mixing up the medicines, and knocking over the mortar, especially when we've postponed our annual sacrifice to him. So I guess the moral of that story is don't postpone your sacrifices to Hippocrates, or you're gonna get the creepiest fucking little doll roaming around, ruining everybody's prescriptions and probably murdering a bunch of people via poisoning. But thank you so much for checking out this video. Special thank you, as always, to subscribers and to Patreon members, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Χαίρετε.